Hi, this is Lorena, and I'm going to have to whisper because I'm babysitting and my grandbaby's sleeping. So, recently I'd worked on a quilt and I ended up having some pokers in the back. It wasn't my tension. It wasn't anything. It was the batting. I went to the Houston Quilt Show and I went with I wanted to learn something about batting. So I went to the Hobbs booth and asked them some questions. I wanted to know could you put batting backwards? Meaning, is there a right side or a wrong side when you lay it down? Like when you lay it down. I always believed that when I had problems with, I heard it's called bearding on the thread line of your back fabric, that it is because your needle may have a burr or your needle is old. And there has been times where I went ahead and I changed my needle and it fixed the problem. But this time, I went ahead and changed the needle. I went ahead and flipped the batting, thinking that maybe I laid down the batting backwards. I know, they don't talk about this stuff. So I thought it'd be a good thing for me to talk about it to you. It is so frustrating when you go ahead and you're working on a client's quilt and you've quilted all the way through and then you roll it up and you see these weird white dots everywhere. And it freaks you out. It freaks me out. I would panic because I don't want to unstitch it. It took me probably 20-30 minutes to quilt it, and it could take me up to 3 hours to unstitch a whole row. You start to perspire, you start to sweat a little bit, and you kind of want to panic because you don't know what to do. What happened? What the hell happened? So, I thought this would be a good tutorial for you guys, for you long arm quilters. Yeah. And also for you piecers. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that long arm quilting was complicated, that it had some complications? I wanted to show you what I'm talking about, because y'all probably like, what? Bearding? Mine didn't beard. Usually bearding is like, where the batting kind of beards through the thread line. I checked my tension. My tension was beautiful. So I know it was my tension. I don't know if it was my thread. Maybe my thread wasn't thick enough. I don't know if it's the fabric. I don't know. I don't honestly know. Wonderful batting popping through. So I wanted to share about changing your needle. I have a tendency to change my needle every time I work on a new client's quilts. A lot of my clients bring me 3 quilts at a time because I give them a discount when they bring me more. And so I tend to change my needle every time I get a new client or I get a new client's job on my machine. But let me share with you some of the variables of how I change my quilt needle. One, I usually change my needle probably every 2 large like king size California king or queen size quilts. I also wanted to share with you that sometimes I also don't change my quilt as much because sometimes I'm only doing baby quilts. And if I do 5 baby quilts or 2 throws and 2 baby quilts, that's when I change my needle. Probably every 4 quilts depending on the size of the quilt. Another variable in changing my needle more frequently is if I use poly batting. I've noticed poly batting, it has a tendency to go ahead and dull my needle out. Other variables in changing my needle is the fabric painted? I also notice that sometimes when I'm working on that beautiful batik fabric, it seems to be harder on my needles. So sometimes if I'm quilting a lot of quilts with batik, I go ahead and change my needle more frequently. Consider also fabric that's painted. Change your needle more often because that paint tends to wear off your needle. So I had been working on my client's quilt and I hadn't really done a lot of quilts. I think I finished 1 or 2 small quilts. So I thought, okay, my my needle can endure this quilt. And I started seeing bearding. So I went ahead. They call it bearding. I saw it batting polka dots in the back of the thread line. And I went ahead and I changed my needle. If you see this, I've learned that it is because, one, my needle's dull. Why you would have bearding is because they said your fabric or your quilt batting possibly could be put on backwards. Well, I went to Hobbs, or a company that sold batting. Batting was their thing. And I asked the man, can you put your batting backwards? Can you? Can you please tell me? The man didn't know what to tell me. He said no. Then he had a question mark in his eye. I don't know. And I'm like, dude, you work in batting. You do batting all the time. Why don't you know? So a wonderful long-arm quilter came and told me that yes, you can put your batting backwards if it has skim. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Meaning it has skimming on one side of it and it doesn't have it on the other. The way I see skimming, and I'll show you a picture of skimming, it looks like this. It looks like it has weird little cotton balls everywhere. Can you see it? You'll even see kind of like the angle of it. It's pretty flat. But on this side, it's lumpy. My batting is placed wrong. I don't know if you see this wonderful, beautiful texture here. And the flat side should be facing up and the texture should be facing down. You can see that I cut my batting and I'm going to turn it the right side out. The silkier side facing down, facing towards the back fabric. But yeah, you can put your batting wrong. In the videos, and I'm going to have a couple breaks, I went ahead and I did flip this batting. And I flipped it the opposite direction because I thought, well, maybe I put the batting down backwards because there is the flat side and the bumper side. Well, as I did that, I still had the same problem. So, from my understanding is if you buy very cheap batting, which I know is very tempting to buy cheap batting, quilting is expensive. It is expensive as heck, and who knows if you're making the quilt for somebody you like. Maybe you're just doing it because you want to. But what I wanted to share is be careful when you buy certain battings. Don't go too cheap because then you'll have bearding in the back of the thread line. And from my understanding, if the batting is too cheap, even when you wash it, the batting will go through the punctured hole of your thread line and beard. And you don't want to see that. Now, it's not the long-arm quilter's fault if that happens. If you have batting that has that glue, or like fusible batting, you're supposed to put that fusible batting facing towards your back fabric so it fuses to your back fabric, not to your quilt top. What I do to remove bearding off of my quilt back is I use a toothbrush. They have this rubbery area right here, and pretty much the toothbrush has this rubbery material, and you can see it here. You can literally see that I was rubbing on the quilt and that plastic rubbery stuff is now on the hard plastic area. I have a toothbrush here and there's some rubbery in this area and also a rubbery area here. Film this. In this area where you have that cotton that is in the way, you start rubbing it and the cotton, the batting will start pulling up. Cleaner view. And all this is batting. As long as your tension is, you have good tension, And I found that this is the best way to get that batting up from that thread line. Of course, when you wash the quilt, if you don't want to do this, but sometimes this looks really bad. And that's how you clean up that batting so you don't see it. Pulls that batting up. I wanted to share with you some thoughts about batting. I know we want to go cheap, and I understand. Quilting is expensive, but I do recommend that you do some kind of investing in some decent batting. My favorite batting is warm and natural, or I saw a quilt this I did for somebody. Oh my God, it was a bamboo batting. My favorite. It was beautiful. It quilted beautifully, and I didn't have any problems. Be careful with some battings that are very thin, and when you lay them down, they just kind of fall apart on you when you're stretching them, or they even do loopties or bumpies on them when you stretch them. Be willing. I know, batting is expensive. Joann's has coupons. If you have a Hancock in your hood, they have coupons too. I know batting is expensive, but you've spent a lot of time on your quilt top. You've invested a lot of money on your back fabric. Be willing to invest in some decent batting because it won't fall apart when you wash it. It won't beard when your quilter is long arm quilting it, or when you're quilting it. And there is a potential of longevity of the quilt. I know some quilts, after a period of time, if the batting is cheap, they start to fall apart within the quilt, and you see lumps and bumps gathering in certain areas of the quilt, especially if the quilt was not quilted densely. So consider investing in a little bit thicker. Like you can see, this batting is pretty thin in comparison to this batting. Now I threw away the bag, so I don't know the name of this batting. It's a pretty decent batting. It doesn't fall apart on you. It has some structure to it. But my favorite is warm and natural. I know we all have our favorites. Check them out and try to see what works best for you. And so, yeah, bearded.